Chris, when you hear Fouad talking about this, I mean, does it harken back to Iraq? Do you see this through the lens of Iraq and Afghanistan?
I don't exactly see it through the lens of Iraq and Afghanistan. What I do see is that the experience of a decade of war in Iraq and Afghanistan with precious little to show for it has essentially bled the will of the American people to get involved in these kinds of things. Before we went into Iraq, I thought it was a terrible idea, not because getting rid of Saddam was a bad idea. He was a horrible dictator, a horrible tyrant, but because I didn't think that the American people had the will, the desire, the vocation to occupy another country year after year, $2.5 billion a week, hundreds of thousands of people dead, and for what? I think that that's the context in which Iraq is important here, and that's what President Obama understands very well. It's sad. It's a situation where probably we should do something in Syria and something more than is being contemplated. But I totally sympathize with the American public that says we just don't want to go there.
Bill, you were obviously in the first Bush administration when it launched the first Gulf War. There were warnings then that it would spiral into a wider regional conflict. We're hearing those warnings today from a lot of people, including from Assad, as we said earlier, called the Middle East a powder keg. Are those concerns real? I mean, that this thing could spiral out of control, that this intervention could spiral out of control?
Things have spiraled out of control. There are 100,000 people dead in Syria. It is spilling over. It's destabilizing Jordan. It is emboldening Iran. It's emboldening Hezbollah. The notion that we can, I mean, it would be different if there were a stable situation or we were choosing to intervene. I would defend intervention in some such cases, and as I did and would do still for Iraq. But this is not that circumstance. So I think the case for intervention is actually not that hard. I don't think the downsides, there are of course downsides, we have to be prepared for them, we have to be serious about it. But I think the case for intervening from a strategic point of view and a moral point of view is awfully strong. The president has to make it. The president is the president. Republican congressmen can make it. People like us can make it. The president has to make it. He has to make it in a serious and sustained way. And he does have to realize that he can't just, all this talk, he thinks he's helping his case by saying, oh, it's very limited, very narrow, temporary. It hurts his case. I mean, I understand why he says it, because you do a snapshot, public opinion polls, people are scared, are weary of war. But the fact is, if we're going to go to war, people want real leadership. And he needs to really, I think, now say, obviously we're not going to, we're going to try to keep it as limited as possible, but we are there to really make the region, to begin to bring some order back to the region, to punish Assad and to really deter people. I mean, if you let Assad use weapons of mass destruction, I mean, first of all, the effect on the ground in Syria itself is horrible, obviously, but what does that say about the future? Do we want to be the country that sits, having the ability to do quite a bit, that does nothing? And I don't think it's a good excuse to say, oh, the American public is weary of war. They're not that weary of war. With presidential leadership, he could win this vote. He could have public support.
All right, we got to take a quick break. Chris John, thank you. Bill Kristol as well. Everyone else, stick around. I want to talk U.S. military strategy coming up next. Even before Congress votes on whether to strike Syria, U.S. ships are on the move in the region. Assad's forces are making moves as well. We'll tell you about that, the new developments when we continue.